Random House Audio presents The Fat Years by Koonchung, read for you by David Kashing Say.
Preface. Koonchung, China's Silicon Valley in northwest Beijing, is a fine place to visit these days. In the 30-odd years since China abandoned Maoism for market reforms, glass and marble-fronted malls and five-star hotels, brimful of balloons, promotions and the promise of the good life, have sprung up all over the capital. And Koonchung has its fair share of such high-rent establishments. The district's grand shopping plaza sprawls across 200,000 square meters, packed with boutiques, supermarkets, cinemas, eateries, and eager consumers. The area happens also to be the center of China's elite institutions of higher education, home to the country's most privileged scholars and students. With its glittering temples to self-gratification and to state-approved academic endeavor, Koonchung is one of the flagships of the contemporary Chinese dream. On the 23rd of December 2010, at one of Koonchung's police stations, a less harmonious episode was taking place. That evening, a Beijing law professor called Tang Biao decided to pay a visit to the mother of a friend. The friend, it so happened, was a human rights lawyer called Fang Yafeng, currently being held under house arrest by the authorities. Since Fang's mother was at home on her own, Tang thought it would be courteous to look in on her. As soon as he entered the apartment, however, a plain-clothed police officer stormed in and loudly demanded his ID, pushing him for good measure. Not long after, a gang of public security reinforcements arrived and dragged Tang back down the stairs, confiscating his glasses in the process, leaving him extremely short-sighted, and into a police van and drove him to a nearby police station. There, more violence ensued, in which Tang's hand was injured. His tie was violently yanked off, his legs were kicked, and he was sworn at, while he vainly quoted his citizens' constitutional rights. "Why waste words on this sort of person?" one police officer asked in front of him. "Let's beat him to death, dig a hole to bury him in, and be done with it." Eventually they let him go, but only, Tang suspected, because they were a little intimidated by his academic status and, more importantly perhaps, because a timely tweet, before the police tried to remove his mobile phone, had gathered some of his supporters outside the police station. This time, Tang was lucky. One of his peers, the lawyer Gao Jisheng, has been in prison for years, multiply beaten, burnt with cigarettes, and tortured with electric shocks on account of his advocacy on behalf of groups persecuted by the regime. Another human rights advocate, Ni Yulan, has been crippled by her police interrogators and is currently under house arrest in a Beijing hotel lacking electricity and running water. In mid-February 2011, Tang's luck ran out too, and he was mysteriously abducted. At the time of writing, his whereabouts remained unknown. The artist Ai Weiwei, renowned for his outspoken criticism of China's government, joined the ranks of the disappeared in April 2011. A short walk from Koonchung's glass and neon palaces, another face of the contemporary Chinese miracle was showing itself. Welcome to the world of the fat years. Koonchung's The Fat Years describes a near-future world that to a degree already exists. This is a China in which a dictatorial Communist Party has guided the country safely through a global economic meltdown that has weakened the liberal democratic West but strengthened the appeal and prestige of an authoritarian Chinese model, enabling China to reassert its pre-modern status as the economic, political, and cultural center of the world. This is a China in which the majority of the urban population, despite the party's repressiveness and corruption and ruthless censoring of history and the media, seems superficially happy with a status quo that has delivered economic choice without political liberties, in which many once critical voices have been marginalized or co-opted. In early 2011, 2 years before the novel begins, the world is rocked by a financial crisis that makes the shock of 2008 resemble a mere wobble, and during which the dollar loses a third of its value in a single day. Somehow sidestepping the economic Armageddon that hits the West, the People's Republic of China instead immediately enters what its communist government officially names a golden age of prosperity and contentment. No one in a placid Beijing of 2013 seems to have anything negative to say about the country. All unhappy memories have been erased, as urbanites busy themselves with self-gratification. Our guide to this paradise on earth is Chen, a Taiwanese Hong Kong writer who has over the past few years made China his new home. He spends his time socializing, going to literary events and parties, browsing in bookshops, or sipping lychee black dragon latte in Beijing's Starbucks, which, following the collapse of the dollar, has had to sell out to a Taiwanese snacks consortium. I felt so spiritually and materially satisfied, he summarizes, and my life was so incomparably blessed that I began to experience an overwhelming feeling of good fortune, such as I had never had before. China's awkward squad, the minority of critics who have poked and jibed at the regime since public opposition became possible again after Mao's death, has been intimidated, isolated, or mainstreamed into silence, leaving an intellectual establishment dominated by complacent national treasures, trendy young things, or fascistic party ideologues. The novel's atmosphere of overwhelming self-congratulation is resisted only by a handful of individuals determined to remember less happy times and to ask why everyone else has forgotten them. We meet an old flame of Chen's, Little Shi, a dropout lawyer turned democratic protester of the 1980s. Fang Chaodi, a hippie globetrotter who is looking for China's lost month, the 4 hellish weeks of martial law imposed after the economic collapse of 2011, in which countless civilians died, and which is now mysteriously wiped from public memory. And Zhang Du, a former victim of government-condoned slave labor. It was, Koonchung has observed, China's current situation that inspired the novel. I got the idea for the book from responses to the financial crisis of 2008. I'd been plotting a novel about China for some time, but that gave me a moment, a focus. That year, as the West reeled from the financial mess while China escaped unscathed, it seemed that everyone, from officials down to ordinary urbanites, began to feel that China was doing well for itself, that there was nothing more to learn from the West, that China can argue back. The public have now bought enthusiastically into China's authoritarian model. The construction of an authoritarian harmony has always been implicit in communist theory and practice, but this became official policy after 2007, when President Hu Jintao extorted all people to coexist harmoniously, love and help each other, encourage each other, and make an effort to contribute to the building of a harmonious society. In recent years, China's communist government has indeed succeeded, perhaps beyond its wildest dreams, in muffling critical voices. The 1980s were choppy times for the regime, as China's intelligentsia debated the disasters of Maoism, and whether there was any place for Marxism in economic and political liberalization. As China stumbled towards a market economy and as inflation rocketed throughout the decade, the conviction grew that the government's reforms weren't working and the leadership had not persuaded the populace that they could lead. The most avant-garde rebels, such as the 2010 Nobel Prize laureate Liu Xiaobo, speculated that China could only experience great historical change if it were colonized as Hong Kong had been after the Opium Wars of 1839 to 42. China is so big, he added as a provocative afterthought, that naturally it would need 300 years of colonization to become like Hong Kong.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?